The mountain air bit through Eleanor's torn dress as she stumbled through the pine forest, her bare feet bleeding on the frozen ground. 3 days since she'd fled her father's ranch. 3 days she'd overheard him negotiating her sale to Clayton Dorsey, a cattle baron twice her age with a reputation for burying wives. The gold locket at her throat, her mother's last gift, was all she had left in this world. The scent of wood smoke drew her forward like a lifeline. Through the trees, a cabin emerged, rough-hewn logs chinked with mud, smoke curling from a stone chimney. Her vision blurred with exhaustion as she knocked, then collapsed against the weathered door. It swung open, and she fell into arms like iron bands. The man who caught her was massive, shoulders broader than her father's prize stallion, with dark hair falling past his collar, and a beard that hadn't seen scissors in months. His eyes, though, glacier blue and startlingly gentle, studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Before we continue with Eleanor and the mysterious mountain man story, I'd like to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support is incredibly important to us and motivates us to bring you more quality stories from the Wild West. I'd also love to know, where are you listening to this tale from today? Please, Eleanor whispered, fumbling with the clasp of her locket. I can pay. This is real gold. I just need... His large hand closed gently over hers, stopping her. Keep your gold, girl. What you need is food, warmth, and safety. His voice was rough as creek gravel, but something in it made her want to weep. Can you walk? She nodded, though her knees threatened to buckle. He guided her inside with one hand at her back, careful not to grip or restrain. The cabin's interior was sparse but clean. A stone fireplace, a handmade table, shelves lined with traps and pelts, and a narrow bed in the corner covered with thick furs. Sit. He directed her to a chair by the fire, then moved to the hearth where a pot of stew simmered. His movements were economical, precise, like a man who'd lived alone long enough to develop rituals. Eleanor watched him ladle stew into a wooden bowl, her hands trembling as she accepted it. The first bite of venison and wild onions tasted like salvation. Name's Marcus Webb, he said, settling into the chair across from her, keeping distance between them. You're on my trap line about 15 miles from the nearest settlement. Storm's coming. You can see it in how the jays are flying. You'll stay until it passes. It wasn't a question, but neither was it a command. Eleanor swallowed hard. My father doesn't know where you are, Marcus interrupted, his blue eyes steady on hers. And won't learn it from me. Eat, then sleep. We'll talk when you're stronger. She wanted to argue, to explain, to prove she wasn't a burden. But exhaustion pulled at her like a riptide, and for the first time in 3 days, she felt the beginning of safety. Eleanor woke to gray dawn light filtering through oiled paper windows. The bed beneath her was softer than anything she'd known. The furs had been piled deep, and a wool blanket tucked carefully around her shoulders. Marcus sat at the table, working a whetstone along a hunting knife, the rhythmic scraping oddly soothing. You gave me your bed, she said, her voice still rough with sleep. Floor's fine for me. He didn't look up from his work. You were shaking so hard last night, I thought your bones might rattle apart. Fever broke around midnight. She'd been sick? Eleanor touched her forehead, finding it cool and dry now. Fragmented memories surfaced. Marcus's hand on her brow, cool cloth on her neck, his voice murmuring low words she couldn't quite remember. Thank you, she whispered. I'm Eleanor Marsh. From the Marsh Ranch south of... I know the Marsh spread. His jaw tightened, and the whetstone paused. Heard your father's reputation. Heard about Clayton Dorsey, too. His eyes lifted to hers, and in them she saw something that made her chest ache. Recognition, understanding. No woman should be property. Tears burned Eleanor's eyes. No one had ever said it aloud before, had never named the wrongness that had choked her since childhood. "What will you do?" Marcus asked, setting aside the knife. "Winter's coming hard. Can't stay here forever, though you're welcome as long as you need." Eleanor faltered. She'd fled with nothing but terror and desperation. No plan beyond escape. "I don't know." Marcus rose, moving to a chest in the corner. He returned with a pair of worn leather boots, a fur-lined coat, and thick wool socks. "These were my wife's," he said quietly, setting them beside her. "She was about your size. Been 5 years since the fever took her. Seems right they should be useful again." The grief in his voice was old but deep, like a canyon carved by persistent water. Eleanor touched the coat reverently. "I'm sorry." "Me too." He moved to the door, pulling on his own heavy coat. Storm's still a day out. "I'm going to check my trap line. There's food in the larder, water in the bucket. Bar the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. I'll knock 3 times, pause, then twice more." "Marcus," Eleanor called as he reached for the door latch. He turned, backlit by the pale morning. "Why are you helping me?" His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Because someone should have helped you a long time ago. Because you're not property, you're a person. And because..." He paused, searching for words. "Because I see a woman worth saving, even if she doesn't see it yet herself." Then he was gone, and Eleanor was alone with the crackling fire and the weight of his words settling around her shoulders like a promise. The days that followed developed a rhythm. Marcus left at dawn to check his traps, returning by midday with game or pelts. Eleanor, stronger each day, began making herself useful. Cooking, mending, organizing the chaos of a man who'd lived alone too long. She found herself watching for him, listening for his knock, her heart lifting strangely when he pushed through the door, with snow dusting his dark hair. He was teaching her to survive. "Hold it firm, but don't strangle it," Marcus said, adjusting Eleanor's grip on the rifle. They stood outside the cabin, frost sparkling on the meadow grass, her breath clouding in the sharp air. "The gun's a tool, not an enemy. Respect it, and it'll serve you true." Eleanor squinted down the barrel, at the tree stump, 30 yards distant. Her heart hammered. Her father had never allowed her near weapons, said they weren't for women. But here, with Marcus's solid presence at her back, his hand steady on her shoulder, she felt capable. "Breathe out slow," he murmured, his voice close to her ear sending unexpected shivers down her spine. "Squeeze gentle, like you're coaxing, not forcing." The rifle cracked, bucking against her shoulder. The top of the stump exploded in a spray of wood chips. "Good shot." Pride warmed Marcus's tone. Again, by the time her shoulder ached and her ears rang, Eleanor had hit the target 7 times out of 10. Marcus showed her how to clean and load the rifle with the same patient thoroughness he brought to everything. "Why does a trapper need to be such a good teacher?" Eleanor asked as they walked back to the cabin, the rifle comfortable now in her hands. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "My wife asked me to teach her everything I knew. Said if something happened to me, she needed to survive on her own." His voice roughened. "Storm hit while I was out checking the far trap line. 3-day blizzard. By the time I got back, he didn't finish. Didn't need to. Eleanor's throat tightened. She died alone. She died capable, Marcus corrected, and there was something fierce in his tone. Found her wrapped in furs by a fire she'd kept burning for 2 days. Fever took her fast, but she fought. He stopped, jaw working. I want every woman I can help to have that same strength, to never be helpless. Eleanor understood then. She wasn't just a fugitive he was sheltering. She was his penance, his way of honoring a promise he couldn't keep 5 years ago. The next morning dawned crystalline and cold. Eleanor woke to find Marcus already dressed, packing supplies into saddlebags with practiced efficiency. "Where are you going?" she asked, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the chill. "Trapline on the North Ridge. Should have checked it 3 days ago." He didn't meet her eyes, his movements tight with tension. "Be gone 2, maybe 3 days. There's enough wood split, plenty of food. You'll be fine." "Take me with you." The words were out before Eleanor could stop them. Marcus finally looked at her, something raw in his expression. "No." "Why not? You've been teaching me." "Because it's dangerous." His voice was harder than she'd ever heard it. "Because winter in the high country doesn't forgive mistakes. Because if something happened to you out there, I couldn't." He stopped, jaw clenching. "You stay here. Bar the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." Eleanor's temper flared, surprising them both. "I'm not a child to be locked away for safekeeping, Marcus. I'm not some fragile thing that'll break if—" "I know that!" The words exploded from him, and he crossed to her in 3 strides, gripping her shoulders. Not hard, never hard, but firm enough that she felt the tremor in his hands. "God, Eleanor, I know exactly how strong you are. That's what terrifies me." She stared at him, reading the fear beneath his anger. "You're afraid you'll care too much, that I'll become another person you can't save." Marcus's eyes closed, and when he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I buried my wife in frozen ground with these hands. Carved her name in wood because I couldn't afford stone. I swore I'd never." His forehead dropped to hers. "But I'm already too late, aren't I? I already care." Eleanor's hands came up to cup his face, feeling the roughness of his beard, the warmth of his skin. "Then don't push me away. Teach me more. Make me stronger, so you never have to bury anyone again." For a long moment, they stood breathing together, the weight of unspoken feelings heavy between them. Then Marcus pulled back, his expression softening into something almost like defeat. "All right," he said quietly. "Get dressed warm. We leave in an hour." Eleanor's heart soared even as nervousness fluttered in her stomach. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Marcus said, but there was the ghost of a smile on his lips. "You're about to learn just how hard this life really is." The mountain was brutal and beautiful in equal measure. Eleanor followed Marcus through snow that came to her knees, her breath frosting in the thin air, every muscle screaming. He'd set a pace that pushed her limits without breaking her, occasionally glancing back to check her progress. "How much farther?" she gasped during a brief rest, hands on her knees. "Another 3 miles to the first trap." Marcus studied the sky, reading signs Eleanor was only beginning to understand. "Weather's holding, but barely. See how the clouds are building west? We've got maybe 6 hours before the next storm hits." Eleanor followed his gaze, noting the dark mass gathering on the horizon. "Will we make it back to the cabin?" "No. There's a line shack about halfway up the ridge. We'll shelter there tonight. Check the traps tomorrow. Head home the day after." He handed her his canteen. "Drink. Altitude sickness hits hard if you're not careful." The water was so cold it made her teeth ache, but Eleanor drank deeply. Her body was changing She could feel it in the new strength of her legs, the steadiness of her breathing. She was becoming something her father wouldn't recognize. Something she barely recognized herself. They reached the first trap as the sun hit its apex. Marcus knelt in the snow, his expression going grim as he examined the empty steel jaws. "Someone's been here," he said quietly, showing Eleanor the trap. "See how it's been sprung, but there's no blood, no fur? Someone triggered it deliberately. And look." He pointed to boot prints in the snow, partially filled, but still visible. 2 days old, maybe 3. Someone's checking my trap line. A chill ran down Eleanor's spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Who? Trappers are territorial, but most respect boundaries. Marcus reset the trap with careful hands. Could be drifters, could be someone with a grudge. His eyes met hers, serious. Could be someone looking for you. Eleanor's hand instinctively went to the rifle slung across her back. My father wouldn't come himself, he'd send men. Then we stay alert. Marcus stood, scanning the tree line with the easy vigilance of a man who'd lived with danger. From here on, you stay within arm's reach. You hear anything, see anything that feels wrong, you tell me immediately. Understood. Understood. They found 3 more traps, all sprung, all empty. By the time they reached the line shack, the storm clouds had rolled in, turning the afternoon dark as dusk. The shack was barely more than 4 walls and a roof, chinked logs and a stone fire pit, but it was shelter. Marcus got a fire going while Eleanor unpacked their supplies. The space was tiny. They'd be sleeping close tonight, sharing warmth out of necessity. Something about that proximity made Eleanor's pulse quicken. Here, Marcus handed her strips of dried venison and hardtack. Not fancy, but it'll keep us strong. They ate in companionable silence, the wind beginning to howl outside. Eleanor found herself studying Marcus in the firelight. The strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes reflected the flames, the unconscious grace in his movements. "You're staring," Marcus said without looking at her, but there was warmth in his voice. "You're worth staring at." The words came out bolder than Eleanor intended, but she didn't take them back. Marcus's hands stilled on the rope he'd been coiling. Slowly, he turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Eleanor, I know what you're going to say," she interrupted, moving closer. "That this is complicated, that I'm confused, or grateful, or mistaking dependence for something else. But Marcus, I know my own heart. For the first time in my life, I know exactly what I want." "And what's that?" His voice had gone rough, low. "You." Eleanor closed the distance between them, her hands finding his chest. "This, whatever we can build together." Marcus's control visibly wavered. His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs stroking her cheeks. "You deserve better than a mountain hermit with nothing to his name but traps and solitude." "I deserve to choose," Eleanor corrected, "and I choose you." The kiss, when it came, was inevitable as sunrise. Marcus kissed her like a man starving, like he'd been holding back for weeks, and his restraint had finally shattered. Eleanor kissed him back with all the passion she'd never been allowed to feel, all the desire she'd been taught to suppress. His hands tangled in her hair, her fingers found the buttons of his shirt. The fire crackled and popped as they discovered each other, the storm outside forgotten in the storm building between them. "Wait," Marcus gasped, pulling back. His eyes were wild, his breathing ragged. "Eleanor, if we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back. I need you to be sure, absolutely certain." Eleanor understood what he was really asking. In her world, in her time, this would ruin her, make her unmarriageable, worthless in society's eyes. But she'd already been ruined by her father's cruelty, already been deemed worthless as anything but property. "I'm sure," she said clearly. "I've never been more sure of anything." Something fierce and possessive flared in Marcus's eyes. "Then you're mine," he said roughly, "and I'm yours, no matter what comes." "Together," Eleanor whispered, and pulled him back down to her. Eleanor woke to gray dawn light, and the warmth of Marcus's body curled around hers. They'd slept tangled together under every blanket and fur they had, but it was his arms that had kept her truly warm. She turned carefully, not wanting to wake him, and studied his face in sleep. He looked younger like this, the hard edges softened, a peacefulness she rarely saw when he was awake. Her fingers traced the scar on his shoulder, a bear he'd told her once, years ago, when he'd been too slow and too cocky. Marcus's eyes opened, instantly alert, and softened when they focused on her. Morning. Morning. Eleanor smiled, feeling suddenly shy despite everything they'd shared. The storm stopped. His arm tightened around her waist. "Don't want to move yet. The traps can wait another hour." Marcus kissed her forehead, her temple, the corner of her mouth. "Let me have this. Let me memorize every detail before reality comes crashing back." Eleanor understood. This was a stolen moment, a pocket of time where they could pretend the outside world didn't exist. She pressed closer, breathing in his scent of wood smoke and pine, and something uniquely him. "Marcus," she said softly, "last night, I don't regret it. I need you to know that." "Neither do I." His hand traced lazy patterns on her back. "But Eleanor, we need to talk about what happens now. About what this means." "It means I'm yours and you're mine," Eleanor said firmly. "It means we figure out the rest together. Your father won't accept that, and Clayton can both go to hell." Eleanor's vehemence surprised them both. "I'm not going back. Ever. If that means living in this mountain forever, then so be it." Marcus studied her face, searching for doubt or fear. Finding none, he kissed her again, slow and deep. "Then we'd better make a plan, because men like your father don't give up their property easily, no matter how loudly that property objects." They dressed reluctantly, the cold a shock after the warmth of their cocoon. Outside, the world had been transformed. Fresh snow covered everything, pristine and blinding white. Marcus checked their position, oriented himself by landmarks Eleanor was still learning to read. "Line shack number 2 is about 4 miles east," he said, pointing. "We'll check those traps, then circle back toward home. If the weather holds, we'll be back at the cabin by nightfall." They set out, Eleanor's legs already protesting the deep snow, but she gritted her teeth and pushed forward. Marcus noticed, of course, he noticed everything, but didn't slow the pace. Instead, he began talking, teaching as they walked. "See those tracks?" He pointed to marks in the snow. "Elk. Big bull, probably 800 pounds. Passed through less than an hour ago." And there, he indicated scratches on a tree trunk. "Bear marking. Too high for a black bear, so it's a grizzly. He's awake early. Probably a young male who didn't put on enough fat for a full winter's sleep." Eleanor absorbed it all, filing away information that might save her life someday. This was her education now, not etiquette and embroidery, but survival and strength. They found the next line of traps similarly disturbed. Marcus's expression grew progressively darker with each empty steel jaw, each deliberately sprung mechanism. "This is a message," he said finally, crouched by the seventh trap. "Someone wants me to know they can access my territory, that I'm not as alone up here as I thought." What do? We finish checking the line. We go home, and we prepare. Marcus stood, scanning the forest with hard eyes. Because whoever's doing this will show themselves eventually. And when they do, I'll be ready. They were an hour from the cabin, exhaustion pulling at Eleanor's muscles, when Marcus suddenly grabbed her arm and pulled her down into a crouch behind a fallen log. "What?" Eleanor began, but his hand over her mouth silenced her. He pointed, and Eleanor's blood ran cold. Through the trees, she could see their cabin, and surrounding it were 5 horses, 5 men, and one of them was her father. "They found us," Marcus breathed, his voice barely a whisper. "But they don't know we're not inside. We have the advantage." Eleanor's mind raced. What do we do? Marcus's expression was calculating, dangerous. We wait until dark. Then we turn the hunters into the hunted. The sun set with agonizing slowness, painting the snow in shades of blood and gold. Eleanor and Marcus lay hidden in the tree line, barely breathing, watching her father's men search the cabin over and over, growing increasingly frustrated. "She's not here, boss," one of the men finally called. "Place is empty." Eleanor's father, she could barely think of him as such anymore, stood in the doorway of her home, her sanctuary, violating it with his presence. Then we wait. They'll come back. It's their supplies, their shelter. They've got nowhere else to go. Marcus's hand found Eleanor's in the snow, squeezing gently. His lips moved close to her ear. "There's a cache about 3 miles west. Food, blankets, ammunition. I keep supplies scattered across my territory for emergencies exactly like this." "How long can we survive out here?" Eleanor whispered back. "Longer than they can." Marcus's smile was wolfish. "They're city men playing at frontier. 3 days of hard cold, and they'll give up. But we need to convince them you're not worth freezing for." "How?" "We make them think you're already dead." Eleanor's eyes widened. "What?" Marcus was already moving, silent as a shadow, pulling her back deeper into the forest. When they were far enough that sound wouldn't carry, he explained. "We find one of their horses. We stage an accident. Make it look like you were thrown, broke your neck. I'll play the grieving husband, bury an empty grave. Your father gets what he wanted, you dead rather than defiant. He goes home satisfied, and we're free." It was brilliant and terrible and dangerous. "What if they don't believe it?" "Then we fight." Marcus's expression was grim. "But Eleanor, I'd rather trick them than kill them. Your father's men, some of them might be good people following bad orders. I don't want blood on my hands unless there's no other choice." Eleanor thought of Tommy Brennan, who'd always snuck her extra food when her father withheld meals as punishment. Thought of the other ranch hands who'd looked uncomfortable with her father's cruelty but lacked the courage to defy him. "All right," she said. "We stage my death. But Marcus, if it comes to fighting, I fight with you. I'm not hiding anymore." His eyes met hers in the gathering darkness, pride and fear warring in their depths. "I know, darlin'. God help me, I know." They moved through the forest like ghosts, circling wide around the cabin. The horses were picketed in a clearing, stamping and snorting in the cold. Marcus studied them for a long moment, then pointed to a gray mare on the end. "That one. She's the oldest, most likely to spook. And she's your father's. I recognize the brand. Perfect. Poetic even. Eleanor's heart hammered as Marcus crept forward, moving with the uncanny silence of a man who'd hunted predators. He reached the mare, gentled her with touches and whispers, then led her away into the darkness. 2 miles from the cabin, Marcus stopped in a clearing where the snow had drifted deep against a boulder. This'll work. The story is you tried to ride down to town alone, got thrown here, broke your neck on the rock. I found you this morning and buried you. Eleanor looked at the place that would be her false grave and shivered. What about the body? We'll bury furs wrapped in your dress, weight it with stones so it feels right. Tomorrow, I'll ride into the cabin, broken and grieving, and tell your father the news. He'll want to see the grave. We'll bring him here. What if he wants to dig it up? The ground's frozen. He won't be able to, not without tools and time. And I'll make sure he knows that disturbing a fresh grave is terrible luck. Marcus's eyes glinted. Mountain superstition is a powerful thing. They worked quickly, efficiently. Eleanor stripped off her outer dress, feeling the cold bite immediately. Marcus wrapped it around furs and stones, creating a shape that could be a body if you didn't look too closely. Together, they dug as deep as the frozen earth allowed, not deep, but enough, and buried their decoy. Marcus fashioned a crude cross from branches, tied with leather strips. Eleanor carved her own name with Marcus's knife, the letters rough but readable. Eleanor Marsh, beloved wife. Wife? She questioned softly. Marcus didn't look at her, his jaw tight. If we're selling this, it has to be real. And you are. In every way that matters, you're my wife. Something warm bloomed in Eleanor's chest, despite the cold, despite the danger. Then you're my husband, in every way that matters. They spent the night in a small cave Marcus knew, huddled together for warmth, eating jerky and hardtack, preparing for the performance of their lives. As dawn broke, Marcus gave her a hard, desperate kiss. Stay hidden, no matter what happens, no matter what you hear. If this goes wrong, it won't. If it does, Marcus continued firmly, you take the supplies from the cache and you run. You go to the settlement, find Tommy Brennan, tell him everything. He'll help you. Eleanor grabbed his coat. We're not splitting up. We're in this together, remember? Together, Marcus agreed, but his eyes held shadows that worried her. She watched from the cave as Marcus rode the gray mare back toward the cabin, his shoulders slumped, his whole body radiating grief. He was 50 yards away when Eleanor heard his voice, raw and broken, calling out, "Help! Someone help me!" Men poured from the cabin. Eleanor's father reached Marcus first. Even from a distance, she could see the calculation in his expression, hope and suspicion warring. "Where's my daughter?" he demanded. Marcus slid from the horse, stumbling, his grief seemingly overwhelming. Dead. God help me, she's dead. That night, as she stirred venison stew over the fire, Marcus carved at the table, wood shavings curling from his knife. The storm he'd predicted had arrived, wind howling around the cabin like hungry wolves, snow battering the walls. "What are you making?" Eleanor asked. He held up the half-formed shape, a bird, wings spread in flight. "Habit helps me think." "It's beautiful." She moved closer, drawn by the delicate work emerging from his rough hands. "You have an artist's touch." Marcus's laugh was short, bitter. "Artist, right. My father had other words for it. Called me soft, worthless. Said I should have been born a girl if I wanted to carve pretties. Eleanor's hand found his shoulder without conscious thought. Your father was wrong. He looked up at her, and something shifted in the air between them. A charge like lightning before it strikes. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek with a gentleness that made her breath stop. Eleanor, he said, her name rough on his tongue. You need to know, I made myself a promise after Mary died. No more attachments, no more loving and losing. I can't. I'm not asking you to, Eleanor whispered, though her heart clenched at the words. I'm just grateful for kindness, for seeing me as human. But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. She was falling, had been falling since he'd caught her at his door. Falling for his quiet strength, his unexpected tenderness, the way he looked at her like she mattered. Marcus's thumb traced her cheekbone, and his eyes held a storm to match the one outside. You're wild, he murmured, almost to himself. Untamed, like the mountains, like the rivers that won't be dammed. And I? A tremendous crash shook the cabin. Both of them jumped as the window shattered inward, snow and wind howling through. Marcus was on his feet instantly, grabbing boards from the woodpile, hammering them over the broken window with practiced speed while Eleanor held them in place. They worked together seamlessly, bodies moving in synchronicity until the breach was sealed. Only then did they realize how close they stood, her back against his chest, his arms bracketing her as he'd driven the final nail. We should, Eleanor began. Marcus turned her gently in the circle of his arms. His eyes were wild, conflicted, hungry. Tell me to let you go, he said roughly. Tell me you don't feel this too. But Eleanor couldn't lie. Not when her whole body sang with awareness of him. I feel it, she whispered. His forehead dropped to hers, and they stood that way for a long moment, breathing together. The storm raging outside, while something equally fierce built between them. This is dangerous, Marcus said finally, but he didn't move away. You don't know what you're asking for. I'm not asking for anything but this moment. Eleanor's hands found his chest, feeling his heart thunder beneath her palms. This now. Whatever comes after, we'll face it. Together. That word, together, seemed to break something in him. His hands cupped her face, and he kissed her with the desperation of a man who'd been alone too long, who denied himself too much. Eleanor kissed him back with all the passion she'd been forced to bury, all the life her father had tried to crush. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers again. I'll die before I hurt you, he said fiercely. You understand that? You're not property here. You're not something I'm claiming. If you want to go, if you want to stop. Eleanor silenced him with another kiss, softer this time, but no less intense. I know, she whispered against his lips. I know exactly who you are, Marcus Webb, and I trust you. His arms tightened around her, and they stood that way as the storm raged. Two people finding shelter, not just from the weather, but from all the loneliness that had come before. The storm lasted 3 days. In that time, Eleanor learned the landscape of Marcus's body, the scars on his hands from trap springs, the old knife wound on his ribs, the way his breath caught when she touched the hollow of his throat. He learned her in turn, the fear that still lived in her flinches, the way she needed reassurance through touch, how she'd never been told she was beautiful and didn't quite believe it when he said it. They didn't rush. Marcus treated her like something precious, but not fragile, asking permission, moving slowly, stopping when old fear shadowed her eyes. "Go slow," she whispered the second night, when his touch made her tremble for reasons that had nothing to do with passion. "It hurts sometimes, the memories." "I know, darling." He kissed her temple, her cheeks, the tears that leaked from her closed eyes. "We have all the time in the world. We only go where you want to go." By the third night, Eleanor initiated, climbing into his lap by the fire and kissing him with a confidence that made him groan. His hands stayed careful on her waist until she guided them higher, showing him what she wanted, where she needed his touch. "Eleanor," he breathed against her neck. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure I want this," she said, pulling back to look at him directly. "I'm sure I want you. I'm sure that for the first time in my life, I'm choosing something for myself." That was all the permission Marcus needed. He loved her slowly, thoroughly, with a tenderness that made her weep, and a passion that made her understand why people wrote songs about this. And afterward, wrapped in furs by the dying fire, she finally understood what it meant to be whole. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. Marcus's arms tightened around her. "I know I shouldn't. No, it's too fast, too dangerous. But God help me, Eleanor. I love you too." Outside, the storm began to break. The morning dawned clear and brutally cold. Marcus was outside early, checking the cabin's perimeter, while Eleanor dressed in Mary's old clothes. They fit her now, after weeks of regular meals and hard work. She was braiding her hair when she heard it. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses. Marcus burst through the door, rifle in hand, face grim. "Get your gun. Get under the bed. Don't come out until I say." "What?" "Your father. 6 men with him, including Clayton Dorsey." Marcus's jaw was set. "They've been searching. Someone in town must have seen smoke from the cabin. Put together the timing." Terror flooded Eleanor's veins. "Marcus, no. You can't fight 6 men. We'll run." "Nowhere to run in snow this deep. They'd track us down in hours." He cupped her face, kissed her hard and fast. "Trust me. Stay hidden. If things go bad..." He pressed a knife into her hand. "You know how to survive now. You'll be all right." "No." Eleanor grabbed his shirt. "Not without you. I won't lose you." "Eleanor!" A voice boomed from outside. "Marcus Webb! We know you got my daughter in there. Send her out, and we'll leave peaceful." Marcus's eyes held hers for one more moment, full of fierce love and regret. Then he pushed her gently toward the bed. "Trust me," he repeated. "Whatever happens, know that I love you. Know that you're worth fighting for." Then he was moving to the door, rifle ready. Eleanor crawled under the bed, heart hammering, knife gripped tight. Through the gap beneath the door, she could see Marcus step outside into the snow-bright morning. "She's not your property, Marsh." Marcus's voice carried clear and cold. "Eleanor's a grown woman, and she chose to leave." Chose? Her father's laugh was ugly. "Girl doesn't have the sense God gave a horse. She needs a husband to guide her, and Clayton here's been right patient about claiming what's his." "I'm not his." Eleanor couldn't stay hidden, couldn't let Marcus face this alone. She rolled out from under the bed and strode to the door, rifle in hand. "I'm not anyone's." Marcus shot her a look that was equal parts frustrated and proud as she stepped up beside him. 6 mounted men faced them. Her father, red-faced and furious. Clayton Dorsey with his cruel smile, and 4 ranch hands who looked distinctly uncomfortable. Eleanor. Her father's voice dripped false sweetness. "You're sick, baby girl, confused. This mountain man's filled your head with crazy ideas. Come on home now, and we'll forget this foolishness." "I'd rather die," Eleanor said clearly, lifting her chin. "I'd rather freeze in these mountains than marry Clayton Dorsey or spend one more day under your roof." Clayton's smile widened. "That can be arranged, little girl. One way or another, you're leaving with us today." His hand dropped to his pistol. Three things happened simultaneously. Marcus's rifle swung to cover Clayton. Eleanor's rifle covered her father. And one of the ranch hands, young Tommy Brennan, who'd always been kind to her, spoke up. "Boss, this ain't right. Girls got the right to refuse a marriage. We all know what Clayton does to his wives. I won't be party to forcing her." "Me neither," another hand said, uncomfortable. "This feels like kidnapping, Mr. Marsh." Her father's face went purple. "I pay your wages." "Not enough for this," Tommy interrupted. He looked at Eleanor with respect. "Miss Eleanor, if you say you're staying of your own free will, that's good enough for me." "I'm staying," Eleanor said clearly, "by my own choice, with the man I love." Clayton's gun cleared leather. "Then you'll die," Marcus's rifle barked. The shot took Clayton through the shoulder, spinning him from his saddle into the snow. The other men's horses reared and danced. But Tommy and his companions kept their hands clear of their weapons. "Next one goes through his heart," Marcus said flatly, already reloaded. "Your move, Marsh." Eleanor's father looked between Marcus's steady rifle, Eleanor's determined stance, and his bleeding foreman writhing in the snow. His face twisted with rage, but underneath it, she saw something else, the knowledge that he'd lost. "You'll regret this," he spat. "Both of you." "I doubt it," Eleanor said. "Now get off this land, and take him with you." She jerked her chin at Clayton. Tommy dismounted to help Clayton onto his horse, binding his shoulder roughly. As the group turned to leave, he tipped his hat to Eleanor. "Glad you found your backbone, miss. It suits you." Then they were gone, hoofbeats fading through the pines, and Eleanor and Marcus were alone in the brilliant morning. Eleanor's rifle slipped from her shaking hands. Marcus caught it, then caught her, pulling her tight against his chest as reaction set in. "You were supposed to stay hidden," he said roughly into her hair. "Couldn't let you face them alone." Eleanor was shaking, adrenaline crashing through her. "We're partners now. Together, remember?" Marcus laughed, the sound breaking with relief. "Together. God, Eleanor, when I saw you step out that door, my heart stopped." "Mine too." She pulled back to look at him. "But I'm not hiding anymore. Not from them, not from myself. You taught me that." His hands framed her face. "You taught yourself. I just gave you the tools." They stood that way, foreheads pressed together, until the shaking stopped and peace settled over them like new snow. Spring came to the mountains in a rush of meltwater and new grass. Marcus took Eleanor down to the settlement, to the small church where a traveling preacher married them, with Tommy Brennan and his sweetheart as witnesses. Eleanor wore a simple dress Tommy's fiancé had sewn, wildflowers in her hair that Marcus had picked that morning. Marcus wore his cleanest clothes and a look of wonder that made Eleanor's heart ache with joy. "You're wild," Marcus murmured as they stood before the preacher, echoing the words from that storm-locked night. "Untamed, like the mountains themselves." Eleanor smiled, squeezing his hands. "Until you touched me," she whispered back, completing the phrase that had become theirs. "Until you showed me what freedom really means." The preacher cleared his throat, smiling. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Marcus kissed her like a man finding water after drought. Like a man who'd thought he'd never love again, and had been proved gloriously wrong. They built their life in the mountains. Eleanor learned tracking and hunting, became as comfortable on a horse as Marcus himself. She planted a garden that first spring, coaxing vegetables from the rocky soil, while Marcus expanded the cabin, adding a room for the children they both wanted. She never saw her father again, though word filtered up the mountain occasionally. Clayton Dorsey had left the territory, his reputation shattered. The Marsh Ranch struggled without Eleanor's quiet management, and her father's health declined with his fortunes. Eleanor felt no satisfaction in his downfall, but no guilt either. She'd saved herself with Marcus's help, and that was enough. On their first anniversary, Marcus presented her with a gift, a small wooden carving of a bird in flight, its wings spread wide. "It's you," he said softly, watching her cradle it in her palms. Breaking free, flying, Eleanor kissed him, tasting salt. His tears or hers, she couldn't tell. "I couldn't have flown without you teaching me how to use my wings." "You always had wings, darling." Marcus pulled her close, his arms the safest place she'd ever known. "I just helped you remember them." They stood on their porch as the sun set over the mountains, painting the peaks gold and rose. Below them, the valley stretched green and alive with spring. Above them, a hawk circled, riding thermals up into the endless sky. Eleanor was wild, untamed, free, and she was home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Eleanor and Marcus's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.